All right, ladies and gents, we are live. Welcome to the show. Wednesday Night Live. Doing it live on the socials at PT Pintcast on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and of course, subscribe to the show online at PT Pintcast and wherever podcasts are heard. We got on the iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, Stitcher Radio. So make sure you never miss an informative episode. Online right now as well at ptpintcast.com. We just started these things. We've got these kind of like these can holders. It's that time of year when having a good can holder is important. Vital, I might say. You can get some right now that are very PT themed. We've got some from all 50 U.S. states, some international can koozies, tumblers, T-shirts, the whole nine. Your PT Pintcast swag. It's all about you. I'm drinking mine right now. Check that online at ptpintcast.com. Great episode today. We're going to talk about tactical athletes, tactical physical therapy and performance with a cool kind of throwback to really the beginning of this podcast as well. So like episodes like this, I get excited about. So let's start the show and bring on the guests. Let's do this thing. All right, we're doing it live. Welcome to PT Pintcast, a podcast that saves physical therapists from missing out on amazing insight, remarkable ideas, and motivational stories in the world of physical therapy. Online, as we mentioned, at PT Pintcast. And just hit that subscribe button on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Drop a review. I'm not going to tell you what to say. You know, my mom left a nice review. If that's anything, give us some stars. Just tell it. Honest feedback is always good. And we always say the ultimate compliment is you telling a friend, telling a colleague, telling someone in class, telling someone, hey, I learned something from this episode. This is great. You should listen to it. That is the ultimate compliment. If you'd like to help support the show, that's the thing that we ask you to do. Episode today is fantastic. We're going to talk about tactical physical therapy and performance. We're going to get into like what is a tactical athlete? I still remember where I was standing when it was Rich Westrick who first explained like what a tactical athlete was to me. I was like, oh, wow, totally different. Did not think of that. We'll talk about the common tactical musculoskeletal injuries, what's included in a program development for soldiers, and then how to teach ownership of injuries and treatment for tactical athletes. Let's get our guest in here to do just that. A retired Army physical therapist and former Special Forces medic and infantryman, currently the director of operations at the Heibel Sports Medicine and Performance Center in Colorado. Let's get Jason Michler on the show. Jason, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Pretty unique background right there. Before we get into that, though, I do like to get the hard questions out of the way. First, what are we drinking?
I'm drinking an Upslope Citra Pale Ale. It's good
Ooh,
stuff. Yeah,
Upslope. I like that very much.
It's out of Boulder. Yeah, it's good. It's good beer. So.
Drink local is what I say. I'm doing out of the Aqua Falls, Wisconsin. I'm doing the summer shandy. I can have one or two of these, but it's very much a summer beer. When you mix lemonade and beer, it screams summer. So cheers for the time. Thanks for coming on the show, Jason.
Cheers. Thanks, Jimmy.
So you have a pretty cool background in your intro. Let's talk about that for a second. Retired Army physical therapist, former Special Forces medic and infantryman, and then your current role working for the Performance Center in Colorado. Let's go back before we go forwards. How was your time as an Army PT? How was your time, as a Special Forces medic? Anything you'd want to highlight there?
Yeah, I think it kind of all evolved over time. For me, I've always been interested in the human body and strength and conditioning. And so that's kind of where my initial interest went. And then when I was doing my undergrad, someone had recommended physical therapy. And so I thought, well, maybe I wanted to be a physical therapist. And after I was in the Army Reserves during my undergrad. And so I was already an infantry guy. So I'd already been to basic training during the summer between semesters. And so I was already an infantry guy. So I knew I kind of was involved with the Army, but I thought maybe I want to be a physical therapist. My grades weren't the greatest. I was lacking some of the classes. And so after college, I did some odd jobs and I was working as a PT tech. And, this was mid 90s and it was a lot of, they call them hum jobs, heat, ultrasound, massage, it's just kind of over and over again, so it was just kind of this, and I hated it. I was like, I don't want to be a PT. This is anything I want to do. And so some guy came into the clinic, told me about the Special Forces Medic program. And that's how I ended up going active duty. I had to go active duty infantry first, try out for the Special Forces. I thought I wanted to be a PA eventually. As it turned out, I went down the road a little bit. I did a couple deployments, saw a lot of multi-system trauma. And during that time, I liked trauma, and I thought, well, maybe I wanted to be like an orthopedic surgeon or something like that. And I realized I didn't really like sick people so much. I didn't like, diarrhea and stomach stuff. And I was really into, biomechanics and physiology and that. And so one day I didn't do so well in organic chemistry. I was looking up kind of where I could go. I wasn't going to get into med school, I didn't think. And I found out the Army had a physical therapy program. And so that's how I branched over to physical therapy. And so that's how my career kind of went. So
thank you for your service, first and foremost.
Thanks, Jimmy. Yeah.
Do you want to say thanks to Owens Recovery Science for bringing you the first round? Looking for a single source for PTs, looking to learn and bring personalized blood flow restriction rehabilitation training into your clinical practice. Do it right with Johnny Owens and his team, owensrecoveryscience.com. Johnny comes from a great military background, Center for the Intrepid, where he really, took a lot of what he does now from the military and talks about that all the time. So thanks to them. Again, owensrecoveryscience.com. They just released 3 new episodes on the Owens Recovery Science podcast. So check out Johnny and Kyle and his team out there doing great things. Good self-awareness. I mean, you could have gone further down the rabbit hole. You were like, I do not like diarrhea. When I was leaving radio, it sounds funny, but it's not. Like, some people just keep going because they're like, this is what I'm supposed to do. When I was leaving radio, people were like, I mean, I don't even know if I've told this before on the show. I took the LSAT prep course. The minute I looked open at the LSAT for law school, I just shut the book right back again. I was like, thanks so much. Can I return this? That didn't go well. I did the GMAT. I went to business school for a year. I want to brag, but I have 1/3 of an MBA, which gets you nothing. You can't even put that on a resume.
Yeah.
But it was self-awareness where I was like, well, I remember I had a conversation with my dad. I was like, well, I did 1/3 of an MBA. My dad is a fireman. He was like, so do you like it? I was like, no, I hate it. And he's like, so you're going to keep going? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I'm just supposed to finish. And he's like, well, you didn't say you kind of didn't like it. You said you hated it. And I was like, I think Dad's onto something. So bailed there. But you mentioned that diarrhea thing. Everybody was like, medical, right? You looked at law, business, the only thing left, right? Well, broad categories like, medical. And I remember being like, dude, I don't like blood, like bleeding things. Nope. I mean, I'm around, I'll put direct pressure on it, but I don't want to voluntarily do that.
Yeah.
And that was when I literally was training for a triathlon, and I was like, oh, there is other things where most of the time people in PT come to you and they're fully intact, right? And that was the crappy thing when I learned in PT with wound care. I was like, no. I signed up for this because everything was going to be closed. Yeah. And they're like, no, well. But good self-awareness on you saying, and you were kind of navigating, I like this, don't like this, want more of this, less of this, and you found your way.
Yeah, I think that's the worst part about undergrad or trying to go to graduate school is you're putting all this work in, you're putting in, time commitment, a financial commitment, and maybe you're not going to get into school. I've never been the greatest grade student. I feel like I have pretty good understanding, but it's really that kind of that buffer period where you don't know if you're going to get into a PT school or law school or whatever, and it's an awful period of time, and it's just kind of unknowing and uncertainty, and so, but it all worked out for me. But yeah, it took a while. So
questions from the audience, comments, drop them below if you're watching live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. A question right there: training at Fort Sam before or after PT school is what Vincent's asking.
So for me, I did my infantry training at Fort Benning, and then most of the Special Forces training was at Fort Bragg. When I went to PT school, initially, so the PT program is at Fort Sam, and so you go to the officer basic course. It's a direct commission, so you get commissioned. I think I got commissioned in September, and then it was 10 or 11 weeks at the officer basic course, and then right from there we transitioned right to the PT program at Baylor. So I was there for 3 years. Yeah, it's a great place to be.
That's great. All right, so that's the beginning of your physical therapy career. So, but talk about that, because you were also Army physical therapist and former special forces medic, and forgive me because this is a world I don't navigate. So I don't want to like say, you know, I don't want to frame it wrong. So like, what were those times like? I mean, what were you doing? Because I feel like, especially we just did an episode last week, military is so broad. That's how fun. I mean, I feel like you can do a lot of different things.
Yeah, you really can. And, you know, it's really whatever your interests are, you can find some type of job to do there. And so for me, like I always wanted to be a soldier. I wanted to be in the infantry or special forces or something like that. And so it used to be if to get into special forces, you had to do a certain time in a regular unit. It didn't matter what your job was. And then you had to be a certain rank. And then you had to go to a selection school, which was 26 days when I went. I don't know what it is now. I think it's probably right around there. But it was just basically like, we call it like a suck fest. You know, we just rock day and night. You're always wearing a 50-pound ruck. You're doing land nav. You know, you're getting minimal sleep every night. And so, you know, all my toes were numb afterwards for a couple months, and my hands, my fingertips were numb. And so it was worth it, you know. So I got picked up, and there's a pretty high attrition right there. I'm guessing maybe 40% get selected. I don't know for certain, but I think for us it was around 40% of everyone that started got selected. And then you get selected for a job. Special Forces has a few different specialties. It's you're a weapons guy, you're a commo guy, you're a medical guy like I was, and then the other one is engineer. And so you get kind of put into these pipelines, and the medical one is the longest one. And so you go to Fort Bragg, you go to jump school, and then you do like a patrol phase, and then you do a medical portion, which is over a year. And, you know, the attrition rate there is really big too. I think we started with close to 80 guys, and we graduated 6. And so yeah. So it was really 6 first-time people, 15 total. Wow. And so some guys get rolled back, and, you know, they have to go, you know, they start a new group, and other guys, they'll get pushed to another MOS, they get pushed to the weapons course or something like that. And then some guys just get pushed back to the regular Army. And, you know, a lot of it's just luck. And, you know, luckily for me, I knew how to study. I knew how to kind of like, you know, time manage. And so, you know, there's a lot of young kids there. And so, but it's just really good. It's just a ton of trauma training. We get actually registered as a paramedic, and we did a rotation up in New York for a couple months in New York City. And, you know, I just learned a ton. And it's really fire hose information, just, you know, it's nonstop for 12, 13 months. But I enjoyed it because, you know, but that's what I wanted to do. And, you know, I was so afraid of failing and getting sent back to the regular Army. And so it worked out. So then from there, you go to another phase, which is like 5 to 6 weeks where all the MOSs come together. Then you go to language school, and then you go to survival school. And then, so for me, the pipeline was about 2 years, and then you get pushed out to a team. And so based on your language, you get pushed to a certain group. You know, there's a few different groups in the United States, and they cover different regions. And so whatever your language is, you get pushed to there. So I ended up in the third group, which is in North Carolina. I spoke French because we take a test called the D-Lab, which is kind of it's like basic grammar. Right. So if you barely speak English, you get French, and so I got French. And so, like, but if you're a smart cat, you know, you get Arabic or something like that, or Chinese. But not for me. You know, they're like, yeah, you can do French. So I
want to see if the audience can guess what I studied in middle school and high school. I think I got for the same reason. They were like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm talking about. Love that. It sounds like you had the right mindset, which I always tell people, like, am I going to get through this? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, do you want it real bad? Like, a lot of times you said it's like luck. And I'm like, all right, yeah. A lot of times that luck feels a lot like want it real bad, preparing for something real bad, and sacrificing for something real bad.
Yeah, I would think so. You know, and it's even like you're talking like PT school, it's just putting in the work, and it's not fun always. But the one thing I did like about physical therapy school, you know, you're with this group of people that they're all have the same interest. And so, you know, I can't think of anybody in my class of PT that I didn't like. That they all wanted to be good physical therapists. And, you know, some of them were younger, some were older like me, but everyone wanted to be a good physical therapist. And so it made it productive for everybody.
Yeah, it was good. It's a good group, right? I mean, like PT is a great.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, great people.
Right. It's sort of like, draws people who are pretty altruistic and, you don't get there by accident. Right. I mean, I think a lot of first year PT students kind of like, I don't know, I somehow slipped in the side door. I don't know how I got in here. And I tell people all the time, like you said, is it fun? Yeah. There's some moments that are fun. Are there some moments that are not fun? Yeah. There's a lot of moments that are not fun.
Yeah.
I say it's like working at the post office, and I've never worked at the post office, but it's what I imagine is like, listen, you got to do a bunch of work today because there's going to be more tomorrow. And guess what? 2 days from now, so knock this out, because if you get real lazy today, you're going to hate yourself tomorrow, and you're going to really hate yourself 3 days from now. So it's like getting that mindset. Is it a suck fest? Yeah, but I feel like, endurance athletes, like they understand, like tactical athletes, you understand what a suck fest is. It's like, it's going to be like, you got to get comfortable. I hate that cliche too, but get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Oh, it's true. And especially with PT school, like I was just talking about the uncertainty of undergrad and not knowing if you're getting it. Like, you're in the school, like all you have to do is finish and you're set, you get licensed. And, so that part for me, I was able to like kind of exhale a little bit and just get after it. And so, I think that's just, oh, go ahead, Jimmy.
I was going to say, I feel like this is a good way to kind of segue into the difference between how you have to train a tactical athlete versus an athlete. I think it was Rich Westerick. This is 3 or 4 years ago when I had Rich on the show. And he just set it up so brilliantly. He's like, Jimmy, you're a triathlete. I go, yeah. He goes, you signed up for a triathlon in August. Right. You know exactly the minute the gun is going to go off right now. You know exactly how much time you have until you have to train. Yep. You know the swim course, the bike, you know exactly how much shade. Pretty much, the weather, so you know exactly what to do. I go, right. And he goes, right. Tactical athletes have no idea where they're going, when they're going, or what they need to do to get there. I was like, oh, that would be hard to train for. So you got to train for a lot of things, but you got to be really good at what is in front of you. And when Rich said that, I was like, oh, yes, that would present some issues. So let's start first, because that was my aha moment. Like, how do you describe a tactical athlete?
Yeah, so, the whole athlete term, we throw around fairly freely, especially when we're looking at the tactical population. But if we're looking at tactical, meaning military or anybody, public safety, police, fire, or whatnot, and I think it's what you just said, is people that have to do something athletic sometime during their job, so whether it's they're sitting in a vehicle all day and then an IED goes off and then they're running, or they're a firefighter or police or fire. And so I teach for a company called O2X, and we talk a lot about baselines, like where your baseline is, right? So if I'm like a overweight clerk in the Army, and I don't think my skill is needed, right? Like my firefighting skill or whatnot. And then I'm driving in a convoy and I get hit, right? Everyone in that convoy is counting on me to get up, fire my weapon, run, and protect them all. And so if my baseline is I can barely get out of that truck, or I can't squat down, or I'm so weak if someone gets injured that I can't pull them out of danger, well, then I'm a liability. And so that's why I think if we look at baselines, we look at police and fire, what is your baseline, a military population? And so that having a physical test biannually is so important, because it makes people adhere to a standard. So a lot of these like police and fire places, they pushed away from it because, there's just a big push that it's biased. But for me personally, I'm like, it sets the standard and it makes you maintain that baseline, so that if I'm sitting in a vehicle, like me right now, 51 years old, I can get up, squat, I can run or whatever. But if I've been sitting around, I've gotten overweight, then I'm a liability to the people I'm trying to help and to the people on my team. And so, the athlete thing, I think it's just these guys that they have to do something that's physically active in their job that other people depend on, whether it's people they're going to help or people that are on their same team or in their same department.
Yeah. And they're so vastly different. My dad was a New York City firefighter. And the thing I think a lot of people that don't know about firefighters, because they watch the movie Backdraft, they're like, well, you just run around with an axe. And my dad's like, and I didn't know this. I mean, I think I was like 14 or 15, and I come from a family of New York City firefighters. My dad's like, we're crawling. Like, if it is a fire, we are crawling 95% of the time. And I was like, I don't think I realized that, because when my dad's walking around the firehouse when I was there and he's putting the stuff on, he's walking around. And then, you realize, like, the difference between standing, your head and where your feet are could be hundreds of degrees. So trust me, man, you are not standing in a room that's on fire.
And you're wearing gear and a face mask, and then that's compromising your breathing. This gear's weighing you down. And so, yeah, it's a huge thing. And Rich is right. Rich knows this stuff. And so it's just, we have to be ready to go from 0 to 60. It's not, if you like a D1 or a pro sports, they go out there, they warm up, they go through the drills or whatnot.
Warm up, right? None of that.
Yeah, it rarely happens like that. And usually, it's just kind of spur of the moment and you're going. And that's why you have to be ready to do it.
All right. So let's go with this. What training is required then? How do you prepare? And I said at the top of the show that this episode and kind of what we're talking about is kind of it's kind of cool for this podcast. It was a presentation in North Carolina when I was a second-year PT student in a room of 1,000 people or whatever. And it was a woman and a man who were talking about the variability in training across hundreds of soldiers. Hey, you might have a guy who's in super great shape, and then you got that bell curve. It's amazing how just law of big numbers, when things fall, they fall in that bell curve. Yeah. And then so how do you the presentation was, how do you approach training for people who are all soldiers but are still vastly different? That made me, I understood enough of that presentation, but not all of it. I caught up with them at the happy hour afterwards, and I was like, hey, let's have a beer. I got to understand. That was kind of the catalyst for this podcast. So I feel it's kind of like, it's full circle for me, but what training's required then? How do you approach that? And what are the common injuries then that you'll see? Because I bet these things would be kind of patternistic.
Yeah. And so and I can only speak to the Army side of the house as far as, I think every service requires some type of biannual test. And, as far as like the Marine Corps, they have it pretty locked down right now. They do a fitness type test, and then they do more like a combat. I think they call it like a combat fitness test. So one time a year they're doing the fitness, one time a year they're doing the combat test. And so the Army's transitioning to the ACFT, which is Army Combat Fitness Test, which involves, some pull-ups, a deadlift, a little shuttle run, some explosive movements. And for me, the reason I like the ACFT compared to we used to do, 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, 2 miles of run, right? So one, we can determine where your weakness is, right? Like, are you sucking on the 2 mile run? Or you can't deadlift a certain amount of weight? Are you getting injured every time you deadlift because you're doing it poorly? Or you just structurally weak? And we can determine, we can assess where your weakness is, and then you can work on that for the next test. So, it gives you some objective numbers so that when we go back and we look at where you're weak or where you're deficient in, you can work on. And the other reason I like biannual tests, or, and then, even if they do it biannually, it's like a recorded biannually, they're still doing it probably quarterly, where they're kind of going out, they do like a diagnostic test. Right. And the importance of that is guys are training to the test. So if there's a test that requires a pull-up and a deadlift and a shuttle run and a backwards overhead medicine ball toss, in a shuttle, so it's really broad and it's touching all the inner systems, as opposed to the push-ups, sit-ups, 2 mile run. So easy to train for, fairly, but it doesn't really show guys deficiencies, and then I don't think it makes them better soldiers. And so we can look at assessments, we can look at where people are weak or deficient, and then we can train to that weakness. And so, but when I was deployed, I kept an injury tracker and kind of looked at where guys were injured or whatnot, and kind of what their mechanisms were. So, but the most common was low back pain, 30% of the injuries, shoulder, then neck, and then knee and elbow, and then everything else is just kind of just whatever. And then with the mechanism, typically 34% was no specific injury. Like they don't know why they're back. Yep, they just woke up and they had back pain.
Slept wrong.
Yeah, they slept wrong, or for a lot of times they were in a vehicle loaded down in body armor for 16 hours, and then they went to sleep, and so it's probably that overload, and then they had pain or whatnot. And a lot of it was working out too. You guys get injured working out all the time, because either they're working out incorrectly or they're just getting after it, and that happens. And then work related injuries, lifting stuff, and so Another reason why having a test where we're doing some lifting is important, because then we're teaching proper mechanics, and we're teaching, and we're training to the test, and we're training to the task at hand when guys go out into their units. And, only a small percentage were combat related. Less than 2% were combat related of the injuries that I saw.
Less than 2% were actually combat related.
Combat related, yeah. And so it's just, but when you see those, a lot of times, the percentage is probably higher, but the injuries I see in theater, if they're traumatic injuries, we're usually pushing them out to Germany and they're going back stateside. But if I'm seeing them, it's, I saw a couple of gunshot wounds that were just mainly soft tissue and they could recover or whatnot. And so, or, they can be a small concussion that we just took care of them for a little bit. So, yeah, so those are the main injuries. Not too different, I guess, in the general population, with the low back pain, but it makes sense. These guys are wearing gear all the time. They're rucking, 50 pounds of gear on their body in addition to like a rucksack isn't uncommon.
So what are the phases, right? So when someone's in theater, when someone is expecting the unexpected, what are you able to do with them in terms of time and programming versus when they are stateside and they are, as you mentioned, training for that test? So what are the differences there?
Yeah, so if in the deployed environment, last time I was deployed, I was stationed out of Baghdad, and I would travel around to the different fire bases weekly, and there's maybe 10 plus fire bases. So I'm just kind of going in and we're just putting in Band-Aids on stuff, right? Like we're talking to people and, back pain. And so we're just doing like a simple modality, giving them some exercises to do. If they get injured enough where they push them back to like kind of like the main base, which would be Baghdad, then I could probably give them a little bit more care, which would be more similar to garrison care, where they're coming into therapy every day. They're working with a tech. And so, but for this population, and a lot of my career I spent with special operations, they're go-getters. And so it doesn't require a whole lot of motivation.
Right.
Sometimes it can become a crutch. Physical therapy can become a crutch, but for the most part, like they're go-getters, and, we give them stuff to do. And the 18 Delta, which is what I was, the Special Forces medic, they know their stuff. And so if I'm going out to a base, each base typically had an 18 Delta. And so what I would get with them, we do a little training with them. So like, here's what you can do for the guys or whatever. So we just talk through some stuff and teach them some basic skills.
But you're dealing with people who their body is their main tool, their main weapon, and they got to make sure that's functioning, and pretty motivated to pay attention to what you're telling them, because they're pretty motivated to get back to doing what they were doing before. I mean, nobody likes to be hurt, but like motivated to do it. We all understand that.
Right. And guys are locked in gear all day long. They're wearing the body armor all day long. Even if it's limited body armor, it's still, it's putting you in this kyphotic position.
Sure.
Sitting in vehicles for hours and hours. And so, it's all this like forward flexion we're in all the time. And so inversion tables are pretty big over there, anything like the guys out with. And they're just teaching them some basic, like, like soft tissue stuff and foam rolling and things we could do to get them to open up a little bit and to do a little preventive care, before and after, they were stuck on a mission for a long time. It tends to be pretty helpful, and guys are usually pretty appreciative of it.
Sure. So you mentioned where sometimes, physical therapy could be a crutch. How as a physical therapist can you teach a soldier really ownership of their own injuries and treatment? I mean, that's the holy grail, right? Because that we want to make sure they don't understand that whatever I'm going to do to you, it's more with you, but it's definitely you doing. How did you use strategies to employ that?
It's a tough one, and I think you have to look at the population. So, if you're working with a special operations population, educating them on what their injury is and how long it's going to take. Someone has a fairly significant shoulder issue, and 2 months later they're still having pain, and you explain to them, yeah, it's not that big of a deal, man. Like, it's shoulder pain is a 6 month, it could be a long deal, like obviously you're not in the same amount of pain for the whole time, but there's a progression to it, and it's not you're in pain one day and then you're not. But if we can educate them on kind of where their pain is, why it's that way, maybe what structures we think are damaged, and the one thing with the military, being a military PT, a lot of times we can get imaging done, and we're able to order imaging and order even an MRI. And if we think someone's fairly significantly injured, we could order that, and then that's a pretty good diagnostic tool. But it's not a great thing to do because then we label people with an injury,
Sure.
Yeah. And so
I was talking on Twitter today. That's where the best and worst conversations in the world happen. But one example that came up, I mean, if you've ever ordered a pizza from Domino's, I know when I order from Domino's.com, they've got that pizza tracker. I know where it is. It's being prepared. It's in the oven. It's out of the oven. It's in the driver. It's on the way. And it ain't sexy, but sometimes the patient knowing where they are in that pizza tracker mentality is like, dude, like this is, you got a little while. Right. And just knowing where you are in that process can make you go, okay, I got a little while. I got to slow down, but I got to focus on where I am now. And sometimes that's the biggest help.
Yeah. And a lot of times we'll talk about like what can you do non-provocatively, right? So say it's a shoulder injury, right? Like, so we're like, what are non-provocative movements I can do, right? Do you farmer carries? Can I do some like low rows? Can I do some pushing and pulling? Maybe start getting into some swings up to 90 degrees. Is anything overhead's bothering them right now? And so we can slowly progress back into this. Like, okay, it's okay. Pain's okay. Like you can keep checking it, but your shoulder's stable. It's going to be all right. Or your back's fine, right? It's okay to get back into the gym. And let's use proper mechanics, and let's just understand that this isn't going to be better next week. It's not going to be better next month. Like it's going to be, well, I should say it's not going to be better, but it's not going to be cured. And like you're not going to be pain free. It's a significant injury. You fell from whatever. And it's not going to be healed overnight. And so, but with the younger population, a lot of times like these younger soldiers, their life is not necessarily under their control. And so we do a thing, in the Army called a profile. And so it's like a limited duty profile. So say a kid gets an ankle sprain, and we can say like no running for 2 weeks or this and that. So the hardest thing probably for the medical providers is, okay, so we give some guidance. You can't do anything for 2 weeks. Well, this guy goes back to his unit 2 weeks later. They're like, well, you can run now. Like, well, he just came off a grade 3 ankle sprain, and then we see him next week. He's like, yeah, my ankle's blowing up again. I'm like, well, this probably wasn't the best thing to do. And so trying to provide guidelines for not just the soldier, educate the soldier, but also provide guidelines for the command. And that's why this whole new with PTs being embedded in the units and strength coaches, it's really good for the Army. It was really good for the militaries. So that, we're just a little better. We're better off than the squad leader that just wants to get after. I get it. He has a guy. He wants that guy back in the fight. He wants a guy back in, working in his unit. But
and he doesn't know. He might not know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. He doesn't know. And let's give them some time, and then you can have him back in a month, as opposed to you keep breaking him, and then you never have him back, and he gets medically discharged from the Army. So
yeah. I love that. Talk about your current position, working at Colorado University and the center out there. What do you get to do now?
Yeah, so I'm the director of operations at the Hibble Center. So it's a collaboration between Centura and the University of Colorado Springs, and so it's a beautiful building. And so Centura, which is the company I work for, Centura Health, we own the first couple floors, and so we have a performance center, we have sports medicine, we have MRI, imaging, orthopedic, physical therapy, and then our performance center, it's all retail, so we run some performance programs, strength conditioning, anywhere from pre-high school, high school. We work with the university athletics, and then we do some master's level training, and so it's good. We have a lot of fancy tools there. So, running assessment, we have the Dari motion capture, some Qualis stuff, and force plates everywhere. Then we also, which is kind of neat for us, we have some altitude chambers, and so which are retail, which is pretty unique. And so COVID wasn't the greatest for them, but we're starting to open them up now, and we have some Olympians training in there. Some of the world-class athlete program is training there from Fort Carson, and we're having some Olympians come in and do some low altitude training, and so. It's good. It's pretty exciting. It's good. And then I also teach a class at the university. I teach tactical strength and conditioning. Yeah, imagine that, right? So it's but it's good. I enjoy it. And the university is on the part of the second floor on up, and it's their human physiology and nutrition stuff there. So
that's great. What would make a great military physical therapist? What are some of the qualities? If there's someone out there who is listening or watching and thinking, hey, maybe I want to do this one day, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So I think it's like definitely. Here's the one thing about being a military physical therapist: like continuing education is always there. Like we can really pursue it, and it's the funding is there to go to a course once or twice a year. And you talked about Rich Westrick earlier, and I took over for him at one of his early jobs. He told me, dude, if you're not going every 4 to 5 months, like you are wrong. Like you need to go and you need to get educated. And I took that to heart, and it makes you so a love of learning, not getting stuck in some whatever you're kind of like whatever you're
given.
Yeah, whatever your channel is, and so initially when I came out of school, I worked with a guy that was a McKinsey guy, so I became a McKinsey guy initially, but then I went and took over for Rich, and so I think having a love of learning and just a love of physical therapy, but the other side of it is understanding strength and conditioning and performance, and because you're going to have these people that come in that are in pretty good shape, and they're going to look to you as the expert, and you telling them to do quad sets for 6 weeks, it's not going to cut it, and you're going to lose them. And you're going to lose.
You lose that. You lose the bond. There's going to be no relationship.
Yeah, for sure. And you're going to lose that relationship. You lose the trust, and so you should definitely have like a love of strength and conditioning. And you don't have to be in great shape, but most military physical therapists are in pretty good shape, and and they know strength and conditioning, and they know rehab, and they do a lot of continued education. So.
Well said.
Those would be the two big things I would say.
All right. That's great insight. All right. We have a tradition on the show. We do something called 3 questions. You ready for 3 questions?
Yes, sir.
Let's do it. Let's do 3 questions. All right, 3 questions brought to you by our friends at Fusion Medical Staffing. Find them online at fusionmedstaff.com. Much like a military physical therapist, you can move about the country as a PT. That PT or PTA license, you decide where to go. Go test drive a part of the country if you'd like. Job transparency, want to be a travel physical therapist? I don't know, pick a spot and go. Fusion also has that job transparency. They're just going to tell you exactly what the position is looking for, what it's going to be like. Most of these assignments are about 3 months, but if you really love it, some turn into permanent assignments. So check them out as where there are people, they need great PTs and PTAs. FusionMedStaff.com. All right, Jason, 3 questions. First question is a where question. You're in Colorado, and you've been, you traveled around. Where's somewhere that you can't wait to go now that we've been kind of like holed up for a year? Where's somewhere you can't wait to go and just visit?
Yeah, I'd like to get to some humidity. So I would say either North Carolina or South Carolina. A little ocean time would be good. So it's been cold, and it's been a cold and dry winter here. So.
You were in Fort Bragg. There's a lot of humidity north and south.
Yeah, no, I like it. It's good.
I got a lot of that. All right, so that's your where. Second question is a what question. What's something you've read or watched or listened to, a book, a movie, podcast, something that you think the audience could get value from?
Yeah, so on the PT side, I'm a big fan of the manual therapist. Are you familiar with him? Yeah, and so
person.
Yep. So he's just kind of, I think he's eclectic physical therapy, and he's a McKinsey guy, and so I really just like his stuff. And so if I'm ever wondering about treatment for some area, I'll usually like get on his site and see if I can figure out a way. And so, but yeah, he's I've never met him, but I really enjoy his stuff.
Yeah, Urson Religioso is who we're talking about.
He's that's the guy. Yep.
You gonna go non-PT? Because you said, hey, in terms of PT, is there something non-PT you'd recommend?
Oh, I like Dan John. Yeah, I don't know if you know Dan John, the strength coach. Yeah, he's funny, and he makes everything a lot more simple than it should be. It's like he can break anything down, and so he has a lot of good books. I think his first book is like Don't Let Go or Never Give Up. But anyways, if you look up Dan John, it's an easy read, and he just has really good stuff in there. It's kind of like, hip hinging and strength and conditioning. So I like him a lot.
Two good recommendations. Last question in 3 questions is a who question. Who's someone the audience should know more about?
Yeah, I would say Rich. So if you guys know Rich, like he is you know him, right, Jimmy? So he is the best PR guy for himself that I've ever met. Like he can sell himself on anything. But here's the thing, like he is such a genuine guy.
He really is. He's
just a great dude. Like he's personable, and I love him to death, man. I've known him. He got me kind of into the, he took me under his wing when I did my residency, and so
the story that we met, I've told this a couple times on the show, but it's worth telling again. I was at CSM when it was in Anaheim in LA, and I don't know, I met him at some party or at some hotel room party. You know how CSM was like, someone's got some alcohol, let's go to their room, and I just meet this guy as I'm like Rich Westrick, and he's got a personality. I'm like, this guy seems cool. I'm still a student. I had just launched the podcast. I was going to a PT pub night like a mile away, and I had like a stack of like 10 boxes of pint glasses, and I literally didn't, on the map, it was like I just had to go this far, but this far I had to walk how many blocks? And I was like, how am I going to get all these pint glasses to this bar? And I'm like literally stressing, and he's like, and I just met him 10 minutes ago. He's like, I got a rental car, man. I'll just go drive you. And I'm like, is this guy really going to show? I'm standing under the awning at the hotel, and I'm like, is this dude actually going to show up? There's no way. I got to call a cab. And wouldn't you know it, pulled around the corner. Like, hey man, throw those glasses in the back. And Rich and I have been friends kind of ever since. But yeah, he's just got that personality.
Yeah, he's a great dude. We do some like Army DPT stuff, and like there'll be some like people there from the class at 27 or something, like, hey, let's go talk to her. Like, all right, man. So he's just a good guy. He cracks you up too.
I mean, there's a good lesson too, right? Which is like, be humble and, be, I think I learned how to be a great physical therapist was available, adequate, and affable. And I was like, wait, adequate? And like, just know the basics, know those. The other 2 things, available and affable. Like available, you got to show up when you got to show up, and affable, that's the important. Nobody wants to work with someone who's a pain in the ass. Like nobody wants to work with that person.
Right, exactly.
There's a good lesson. All right, last thing we do on the show, Jason, is the parting shot. All right, parting shot brought to you by our friends from the Academy of Orthopedic Physical Therapy. It's June, but we're already starting to look towards CSM and what's going to be going on with the programming out there. The Academy of Orthopedic Physical Therapy leading the way in orthopedic care. Independent study courses, ISCs. One of those, a lot of people ask about, download the reading list for, is current concepts of orthopedic physical therapy. That is the perfect roadmap if you're saying, I don't know where I am, I don't know where you are in your orthopedic knowledge, wherever you are. This is the roadmap to get you to that OCS, right? Confidently and competently. So check that out. Available now, current concepts of orthopedic PT at orthopt.org. All right, Jason. Parting shots, really just your chance for a mic drop moment, a sentiment, a thought, an idea, whatever you'd want to leave with the audience as we wrap up today. What is it?
Okay. I would say, Ben Askren, he just fought one of the Logan brothers and got knocked out, but he's a great wrestler and fought in the UFC and great MMA guy. But he had I think he was talking about beginner's mind. And so what he was saying is, when you're learning, so if you're a physical therapist, you're learning, sometimes just shut up, right? Just ask questions and be open to whatever somebody is saying. And let's always try to advance the type of physical therapist we are, the type of strength coach we are, and to be better. And don't always have the answers, and be humble enough to recognize maybe you don't know everything. But then when it's time to be a physical therapist for your patient, that's when you're the expert, and that's when you lay down the law, man. And so that would be my thing. Just, let's as a physical therapist, let's just have an open mind and be willing to learn from others and to be open to new concepts.
Be humble, right?
Be humble, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
When has something ever gone wrong because someone was really humble, right? Like I don't think I can think of an example where someone was too humble. Great advice right there on your parting shot. Jason, thank you again for your service. Appreciate all that you do.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thanks for the episode tonight, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much.